As always, such amazing divine orchestration of all of the pieces of the service that we didn't, just with like a title of the topic, we didn't plan it that carefully, but it all flowed together. So I'm just feeling so grateful and so full and so glad that there's different ways to give this message. We can give it with our bodies, with movement, and embody it, and with song and with poetry. And also, I'm appreciating the reminder that I wanted to take my shoes off. So, a question to reflect on. When was the last time you truly rested? When did you last let go of any sense of productivity, results, obligations, shoulds? I'm not talking about going to sleep at night, which is obviously important, but really that's an obligation of sorts to be able to continue functioning as a human being. I'm talking about resting for the sake of rest, not so that you can function better later. Do you remember? We often fill our downtime with movies, shows, books, podcasts, music, and of course social media and news feeds, all of which can enrich our lives, but they keep our nervous systems activated, our senses distracted, and they do not let us sink into true rest. Some of us honestly don't have much downtime at all between work and caregiving, one or both often. The stress and exhaustion make it harder then to choose true rest in whatever little bit of time we have. Instead, we might doom scroll our phones in a practice called revenge bedtime procrastination. I've learned about this since I started doing it as the mom of a toddler. I'm sure there was some other form of revenge bedtime procrastination before cell phones. We are so identified with productivity that true rest can feel impossible or terrifying. When we have been sold the lie that our worth is in what we do, then we always feel like we ought to be doing something more, or somehow make rest itself productive. I know how hard it is to stop. This very week, my body was clear that I needed to rest during my flow time. It was a very intense one. I was woozy and fuzzy and achy and exhausted. Yet the band rehearsal and the planning for this new ministry project and the sermon preparation for today simply had to march on, even if it was hobbling on half of a leg. I did take some more moments for rest than I might have in the past, but really what my body was saying was that I needed total rest, like I needed to cancel it all. Oh, the irony, right? Preparing for this sermon. This is not how it always was for us humans, or how it has to be. Do you remember somewhere deep in your bones, in your cells, how your ancestors rested when the sun went down? How they took naps in the heat of the day? How they daydreamed by the creek after walking miles with the water jug? How their pace slowed down with the season of death. How they gathered to talk and dream and sing and fall silent. I know it sounds romantic and impossible to return to such ways of being in our context. Even if there were a clear path to do so, most of us would not choose its uncertainty and vulnerability, dependence on nature. But we do have proof that our frantic pace is not inevitable. Do you remember in the spring of 2020 when humans finally rested from their labors for a spell? Do you remember the birds singing in urban centers where they had never gotten a word in around the traffic noise and the smog? Do you remember how wild animals roamed the streets while humans stayed inside? 4.5 years later, we have returned to the same constant buzz of activity. We are gearing up for another fall full of projects, studies, sports, commerce, events, fundraising campaigns, not to mention the big campaign weighing on all of us here in the United States. Yet the transformations of the pandemic are still working in us. Most of us are still at some point in the process of grieving and healing from the collective trauma. We also gained new ways of being, relating, and resting. Some of us experienced a sense of resurrection in the midst of the death and disconnection. And these resurrected bodies refuse to return to the rhythms that were killing us. We refuse to sacrifice our aliveness for productivity. When I was with you earlier this year at Easter time, I incited you to practice resurrection, to put your faith in the natural cycles and the supernatural miracles, both of which we can experience in loving attunement with the living earth around us. Rest is the most countercultural and powerful way of practicing resurrection in our time. It is the primary way that we can begin to live more in alignment with the earth's wise cycles and to open ourselves to her miracles. Rest is a necessity to experience the sacred worth of our bodies and our beings. And I know as walkers of spiritual paths, as stewards of the earth, as change makers, we still struggle to prioritize rest. We want it to be about achieving, producing, or improving something, and it's about not doing. It's about letting go of improvement. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the maker of the heavens and the earth rested on the seventh day. Even the creative force of the universe must rest. Are we so much more important than this one that we must keep busy every single day of the week? Consider the message of one of the most memorized and cherished sacred poems in history, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord lets me rest in grassy meadows. The Holy One leads me to rest beside still waters. She keeps me alive. She guides me in paths of righteousness. Through the darkest valleys, in the presence of enemies, in the middle of conflict, in the heavy work for mercy and justice, in the endless tasks. At a banquet feast, with an overflowing cup, which the Lord prepares for me so that I don't have to do anything, she gives me rest in her house forever. Rest is a profound act of trust in the divine. As I release the egotistical illusion that the world needs me to be so active and productive to keep going. Resting, we remember that we do not beat our own heart. We rest not so that we can do more later, but because it is our birthright as beings of sacred worth. This vision of rest that I am casting is indebted to Tricia Hersey, who founded the NAP ministry. Hersey, also known as the NAP Bishop, wrote Rest is Resistance, a manifesto for reclaiming rest to liberate us from the evils of white supremacy and extractive capitalism. She elucidates the ties between chattel slavery, modern racial injustice, and the grind culture that glorifies overworking. Hersey insists that for us to heal from the damaging effects of grind culture, we must make space for all bodies to rest, not just privileged bodies, white bodies, or cisgender male bodies. A racist capitalist culture will keep creating structures that demand that people work themselves to the bone, especially people like her, a Black woman. But all of us have internalized grind culture, making ourselves slaves to the system of productivity that is destroying us along with many other creatures and ecosystems. Our divine calling is to carve out space and ways to claim rest, even when it seems foolish, irresponsible, or lazy, even when it creates conflict, inconvenience, or discomfort for others, and in so doing, to invite others into deeper practices of rest as well, to dream up spaces where all the weary ones can rest. Hersey draws on the inspiration of Black liberation authors and thinkers, the testimonials of slaves who found ways to rest and resist impossibly oppressive conditions, and from her own ancestors. And her work also more subtly draws on the teachings of Jesus, that man from ancient Palestine who forged a path to realizing we are all embodiments of the divine. He invites those who are weary, who are carrying heavy loads, who are marginalized, who lack support, to come to him, and he will give them rest. When he says this in Matthew 11, he offers rest unconditionally, not once you've made enough money or proved your worth with your selfless service or restructured your life so that your rest is not an inconvenience to anyone else. No, it is now, it is here with him that he will give you rest, for his yoke is easy, his burden is light. In John 10, Jesus says, I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Jesus, the gate, does not exclude. The gate makes a way in for those who have been excluded. It is an escape route for those whose leaders have stolen their rest, like thieves, have tied up heavy burdens of obligations, judgments, and labors upon them. It is a doorway also for the parts of ourselves that we have excluded when we have internalized grind culture. It is a gate to green pastures where we can rest from the forces that exclude, belittle, oppress, and extract our vital life force. Jesus is the gate to a pasture of life abundant, where we can live to the fullest, knowing our true, wild, deepest self is a sacred wonder, not because we do or create or accomplish anything at all, but because we are divine creatures. And resting is the way we affirm and live into this identity. When we rest, we simply exist as divine creations and embrace the worthiness of our existence. The Nap Bishop insists that we rest not only when we are weary, not only as a means to an end of, re-energizing. We rest simply to enjoy abundant life. And she recognizes that deprogramming from grind culture and reclaiming rest as our divine birthright is a gradual and lifelong process. It will not be easy or quick. I am still continually forgetting the power, the importance of rest, even 4.5 years after the pandemic set me on this path of seeking true rest. Hersey recounts that she began her experimentation with rest when she was in seminary studying for her master's degree, exhausted by the grind of academia and work and mothering, and she began napping in public places around campus. It was the only way for her to claim time to rest. And she did not know if it would work out for her to prioritize rest. She leapt with faith that God wanted abundant life for her. She rested despite all the systems in place to squeeze the light out of her. And she started curating public napping experiences, which were transformational for the participants. Eventually, she started a global movement for people to reclaim their rest and their dream space. And she has kept resting every day, even as the world has kept challenging her right to rest. For our hyper-connected, hyper-speed, modernized culture built on a legacy of colonization and slavery, resting when we could be working is the most profound practice of resurrection. And it is not easy to do. Even our downtime and our spiritual practices can be overshadowed with a sense of consumerism or with the allure of achievement. Let me share with you some of the Nap Bishop's suggestions for deepening this practice after she spent decades cultivating ways to lie down in green pastures. 8 of her starting points include, this is the first one, interestingly, detox from social media weekly, monthly, or more. If any of you are not on social media, you are way ahead of us all. 2, begin to heal the individual trauma you have experienced that makes it difficult for you to say no and maintain healthy boundaries. 3, start a daily practice in daydreaming. 4, accept that there is no quick fix. 5, slowly accept that you have been brainwashed. 6, slow down. I love how much slow there is in here. 7, you are enough now. Repeat this to yourself to repair the way white supremacy and capitalism have wrecked your self-worth. 8, create systems of community care. There are more than 8, but those are the ones that I picked out for you, so definitely go get the book. And now she also offers specific ways to rest that are creative and adaptive to the challenges that grind culture is always presenting to rest. So here is another partial list of her suggestions. Closing your eyes for 10 minutes. A long shower in silence. meditating on the couch for 20 minutes, daydreaming by staring out a window, slow dancing with yourself to slow music, a sun salutation, a 20-minute timed nap, if it has to be timed, praying, not immediately responding to texts and emails, a meditative walk in nature. So what resonated with you from that second list? Maybe what sounded challenging to you? And what other practices might be your way of resting and resisting grind culture that you can integrate more fully or more boldly into your life today? What is one thing you could start today? We must claim these practices, even though the dominant culture will not make space for us to rest. Some of us meet seemingly impossible challenges to resting, but we can and must imagine ways to rest, to dream, to dwell in our divine belovedness. In the Gospel of Truth, one of the early Christian writings that did not make it into the biblical canon, it talks a lot about rest, and the writer paints this beautiful vision of spiritual attainment. This is the way of those who hold something of the immeasurable greatness from above. They do not have death within themselves, but they rest in the one who rests. They are full and undivided from the one who is truly good. They need nothing at all, but they are at rest, fresh in spirit, and will listen to their root. May these words fall on ears ready to hear. May we listen to our root, to our place in the rhythm of life, to the divine within us that always knew what we were made for. May we release the ways of death and walk through the gate that leads to rest. May we close our eyes in green meadows and dream of a creation where all are free to live abundantly, to rest